Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where we chat with startup founders just like you from all over the globe. Each episode, we bring you practical and actionable tips to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups. And my guest today is Matt Blumberg. Matt, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Yeah, my pleasure, Kevin. Good to be here.
Had a great little pre-chat here, but I am anxious for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. So if you and I met at like a networking event, how would you introduce yourself?
How would I introduce myself? Well, I would start with my family. So I am married to an awesome, wonderful woman named Matakita, which is extremely hard to pronounce and remember. She is a CEO coach. So, by the way, just tip for those at home: if you want to be a CEO, being married to a CEO coach is quite handy. And we have three great kids who are teenagers. We have a 14, a 15, and a 16.
Wow.
And I spend a lot of time with my family. I spend a lot of time coaching baseball. And the five of us actually just started a nonprofit, which is really exciting, called the Million Meal Project, which is a whole different story. But that's me. I live just outside New York City. I've spent my whole adult life in and around New York City. I'm from Southern California. Don't ask why.
That's culture shock, brother.
It's culture shock. I miss California. Yeah, that's me.
Man, thank you for taking the time, just kind of lay a good foundation. But it's, this is the Rising Tide Startups. Once we want to talk to founders, we want to talk to those who have kind of gone on the journey of starting something and running it successfully, and to kind of set the stage and kind of set the tone for those that might be sitting in a cube somewhere going, wow, I got to break out of here. I got to do something. I've got some itch that I've got to scratch within me. But I'm just curious a little bit about can you hit kind of the high notes about, history? What led you to your current gig?
Yeah, so my career is super quick. After college, I was a management consultant. I worked in venture capital for a couple of years, which was very helpful.
Bain, McKinsey,
Mercer, which is now Oliver Wyman, and then General Atlantic, which is now a private equity firm. At the time, was venture capital firm. And then I got the bug to be an operator and to be in tech. So I worked 95, 6, 7, 8, 9 at a company called Moviefone, which was a small cap public company in Manhattan that was kind of interactive services media company. It was I always say it was the internet before the internet, because it was touch tone telephone interactive service.
I remember those dial tones.
Yeah, exactly. And helped them start their internet business and built their internet business inside of another company in the early days of .com. Started a company in '99 called Return Path, which was an enterprise SaaS company in email marketing. Built and scaled that for 20 years. And
survived the .com crash.
Survived all kinds of things: the .com crash, 9/11,
recession,
financial crisis, and sold the company in 2019. And then started Bolster in April of 2020. So we were working on it pre-pandemic, but started it officially 2 weeks into the pandemic. And Bolster is a marketplace. It's an online marketplace for executive talent. So we exist to help founders and growth stage CEOs, entrepreneurs find executives. And we help them find executives for a whole range of things, from a board member to full-time executive to a freelance executive, which could be for a project. It could be for a fractional executive role or an interim role. We help them find mentors and coaches. And, essentially our team had just spent, 20 years scaling ourselves as we scaled the business, and helping other founders and entrepreneurs scale by mentoring them, by, answering their questions, sometimes formally, lots of times informally.
Sure.
And when we sat down to figure out what we wanted to do for our next act after we sold Return Path, we said, you know what, we want to productize that. We want to help. We want to create a business that is in business to help entrepreneurs scale more effectively. And when you look at the talent landscape, especially at the executive level, there are kind of two ways you find executive talent. And we think there needs to be a third way and a better way. So one is you hire a headhunter and you spend 6 figures and 6 months, and you end up with a really expensive full-time person at the end of it.
And they're on the supply side, by the way.
They are. The other, and so that has all kinds of problems with it. It doesn't really lend itself nicely to the startup environment, which is more agile and flexible and cheap. The other way that people find talent is they email their friends or their investors or board and say, hey, who knows someone? I need help with such and such. And like that might or might not work. It's certainly not comprehensive. It doesn't lend itself to any diversity. You know, we just said there's got to be a better way to do it. So that's what Bolster is.
So I'm curious, like the 8 of you are sitting around a table and saying, you know, hey, I did this all week long. Why don't we go make a living at this? I mean, what was that conversation? Take us inside that little group chat that you had where you arrived at that. Wasn't quite that quick.
It wasn't nearly that simple. There were a lot of inputs into the beginning of the business, and including from some of our founding investors. High Alpha, which is a venture studio that we've known the principals of for 20 years. Silicon Valley Bank is one of our founding investors as well. So there were lots of different origins of the idea, but I would say the notion that that we know startups need help, and we know they need help with executive talent, and there's got to be a better way of connecting the two sides of it. It was an organic process of getting there for sure. What was not organic was we were committed to a few principles. We were committed to working together. So all of us said, the most important thing is team and working with people you trust. So we were very committed to starting a business together. We were very committed to the value set that we had developed over the years at Return Path and extending that for ourselves. And we were very committed to not doing something in marketing technology, because 20 or 25 years is a really long time to do the same kind of thing. And we wanted to do something where, we felt like we could really blaze a new trail. And build something that wasn't just like, oh yeah, well, let's do another email technology business that looks a lot like the other ones, but it is differentiated. Slightly
better,
we wanted to do something that really took a big swing at a big problem space.
So the thing that comes to mind when I hear you kind of explain that, I mean, this I'm going to show my ignorance here. I mean, the first thing is like, this is not new.
Hiring people is not new. Hiring people goes back a long way.
Indeed, and Monster, and been around a long time. So tell me, what is kind of the USP of the idea that says this is our differentiator, our elevator pitch, that to just set you apart from everyone else?
Yeah, obviously lots of job sites online and lots of recruiting businesses over the years. The thing that's different about us is we are only executive level. We are all executives, and we are executives for any use case. So you can find places that help you find fractional CFOs, no problem. We find all executives. There are not a lot of places where you can go to get help finding board members and executives and freelancers. So that's sort of the thing that's unique, and it's online. So it is. Even though we help our clients, we are a managed marketplace. You can work self-serve in our environment, and it is, I think in the long run, and even today in a small way, kind of better, faster, cheaper, and just different way of going about it.
So it's the proverbial, it's the it's the Airbnb.
Uber for executives, Airbnb for executives. Yeah.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor, Podbrand Media.
As a business owner, new sales leads are essential. At Podbrand Media, we create a branded podcast for you to generate those leads by interviewing your best potential clients as subject matter experts. Not only creating great rapport, but also great content to share in your industry. Affordable and effective. Contact us today at podbrandmedia.com to learn more.
So how do you vet either side? How do you, especially on the supply side, how do you vet? I can come in and tell you, I'm an executive. I want to be in your marketplace,
Yeah, so we do the first 1,000 people who joined, maybe 1,500 people who joined, we actually interviewed them. And then we decided that wasn't going to scale. We knew that wasn't going to scale, but we felt like that was important at the beginning. But that taught us a few things. When we think about sort of vetting or signal, there are a couple things that we do. Up front, we do what I would call very cursory vetting. We don't do deep vetting, but we will research you enough to know that you are who you say you are. You, in fact, have been at a senior enough level for enough time to be in the marketplace. We do a light reputational check as well. And we've bounced a couple people who've doesn't take much. You Google someone and like all sorts of horror stories.
Right. Yeah.
So we do a little bit of that up front. Long term, I would say a couple different things. We are a marketplace, so ratings and reviews will matter. We also have on member profiles on Bolster sort of a 2-track system. There's badges and vouches. So if you are invited into Bolster by, say, a venture capital firm or by a professional association, your profile carries that badge. So that's, a little noise.
It's kind of like the blue check signal on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah. And then we also have a system of vouches. So, my profile will have a badge saying that I've worked for Union Square Ventures companies over the years. My profile also has a vouch from Fred Wilson at Union Square Ventures, where he's literally written something up about me. So that's another way that we think about it. But, at the end of the day, no one is ever going to hire a senior executive without interviewing them and probably some references on them.
Due diligence on the buyer side, for sure.
If I think about my entire career working with other senior people, there are 10% of people I've worked with that I would hire, no questions asked, to do anything. There are 10% of people that I would never hire and never work with again to do anything. And with 80% of them, the answer is it depends. So it's impossible to have a marketplace for talent where you say these people are good and these people are not good. Because for the vast majority of people, yes, I would love to work with them again. It depends what the job is.
We're a pretty connected society too. So, I mean, if you're running a large enough firm, people are going to know who you are. I mean, it's hard to hide as the CEO of, Amazon.
It is.
Or anything, that has a bunch of zeros after it. But it's interesting that how did you guys decide between the 8 of you that who becomes like the de facto leader?
I was the CEO at the last company, and
you got an extra vote.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure that was ever a big question, but we work really effectively together. We have a very kind of flat, non-hierarchical environment throughout the whole company, not just with the 8 of us. We have good back and forth. We challenge each other, I think, pretty effectively. I don't know that was ever a big thing.
So I've got one more question, kind of about the Bolster model.
Yeah.
So what do you see as, like, what's the ideal situation that a company would utilize the service? Is it, we've looked in-house, we've contacted all our quote Rolodex that we had, and we're now we want to take the next step, or is it a first step?
Actually, we've built Bolster with the sort of unofficial motto of every search begins at Bolster. So it's free to join as a member, and it's free to search as a client. And you only pay us if you hire someone. We also have a really good collaboration engine on the platform. So you can come in as a CEO, and instead of just emailing your board or investors and saying, hey, who knows a marketing person, which leads to like this barrage of, okay, this person sent me a text and this person sent me a tweet and this person sent me a LinkedIn thing. So the platform itself has the ability for you at no cost to start a job, start a slate, and you can invite collaborators to it. So it works like a Google Doc. People can drop in LinkedIn profiles and it organizes everything for you in a slate. So without Bolster doing anything other than being a free platform, you can run a search on us. If you're running a search on us, we can also suggest candidates to you. And if you hire one, you can pay us.
Can I also search candidates on the, like, could I look and invite people to apply for my own job?
Yeah, exactly.
So I told you I wasn't going to ask any more questions, but you said something. Now I got to ask another question.
Okay.
So the idea, what is it on the honor system? I mean, how do you keep me from just going outside the system
welcome to marketplaces, right?
Exactly.
How do you prevent someone from giving their Uber driver cash and having the guy cancel the ride?
Yep.
You don't. We have terms of service. We're pretty clear with our clients that when they set up a client account, it's in their face, like you can't go around the marketplace.
Right.
Obviously, we see the activity going on in the marketplace.
Mhm.
We engage with clients as well, and at the end of the day, you can't prevent people from doing everything, but
Yeah.
we have pretty reasonable pricing. We're generally pretty cheap and fast. We also for our members, it's still a little different if they're getting a full-time job or a board gig,
Mhm.
which is equity only, or a W-2. But any of our members that are getting a 1099 from a client because they're doing fractional work or project work, we actually do the billing and the collection and the payment and everything else on the platform. So
Yeah.
we try to have all sorts of reasons to be on the platform and not a lot of reasons to go off the platform. Is there slippage? I'm sure there's some slippage.
Yeah. I'm thinking if somebody's going to go around me anyway, I probably don't want them on the platform long term, anyway. So it's interesting. You had, 19, 20-year track record, in one place, and then you've, suddenly shifted, and now it's a completely different gig. I'm sure even size of organization and the people you relate to. We learn lessons along the way. I mean, I'm really curious, just kind of diving a little bit and kind of getting inside your psyche a little here. So what you said one day, I just decided that, I want to start my own thing. I'm curious, is there a genetic disposition to people that wake up one day and say, hey, in your opinion, is there a genetic disposition to say, hey, I really need to do this? Matter of fact, I have to do this.
It's a really good question, right? I mean, the nurture versus nature debate is one that will never be resolved. But so let me start my answer by saying, I think there are two types of entrepreneurs. And I've blogged about this before. I think there are what I would call serial entrepreneurs, and then what I would call operator entrepreneurs. And they're different. I think for both of them, there are some underlying traits and proclivities that are probably genetic, but nurture's got to play a huge role in it. You can learn lots of things in life. And I think it may be a little different for the two types, like call it, 60-40 for one of them and 40-60 for the other. But I do think there's a genetic component to it. So let me talk about the two types for a second. So when I think serial entrepreneur, that's the kind of person, they generate an idea every minute. They probably have some level of ADHD. They are easily distracted by shiny objects. Or, as one of my co-founders, Nick, says all the time, like they're like a dog, like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel.
Exactly.
They, as people, like they would rather generate one good idea and 99 bad ones than just generate the one good idea. They're always thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. They're excited about what could be, not what is. They are probably more philosophical and probably a little more theoretical at times. They're probably really fun at cocktail parties. And they'll say things like, oh, yeah, I thought of selling books online before Jeff Bezos did, right? So, so that's your serial entrepreneur. And I think some of that is hardwired. The kind of person that just sees possibility, they see blue space, right? That's hardwired. Can the other things be learned? Sure. But flip over for a second to now the operator, right? So the person who, starts the business but wants to run it for 20 years, right? So, they don't care about the idea. I mean, sure, the idea is important, but they're happy to take someone else's idea. Or be part of a team that has the idea. It's not just about the idea, it's about making something work. They would rather the flip, right? They would rather generate one idea and execute it well than generate 100 ideas. They're problem solvers, they're people. I like to say they may be less fun at cocktail parties, but you want them on your paintball team. um, and so for that, again, like there's a component of that's hardwired, but a lot of that
Mhm.
can be learned over the course of a career in business for sure.
So is the best version of a CEO a little bit of both?
I don't know. I'm not judgmental about it. In my career, I'm more of the operator type for sure. Although, the longer my career goes, the more ideas I generate.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think a lot of people are have some of both in them, but I don't know that one is better than the other. I mean, you know, but it's yeah, I don't know. If you look at the great companies, some of them were run for a long time by their founders, and some weren't.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I don't think you can say one or the other.
It's interesting as you were describing those. I mean, the one key characteristic that seemed to, fit one that didn't necessarily fit the other is longevity.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
like, I like an operator. I'm going to stick with this because I really want to see it through. The serials are more like I'm the initial creator. I'm
Yeah.
the idea generator. I want to get it started and launched. I am not the one to kind of make sure the belt keeps running on the assembly line.
Totally. And
Thing.
I mean, the trick is if that's you to know that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, and to not force yourself to be the operator, right? Because you're miserable, people around you are miserable, and they are different types for sure.
So if you're looking at, I mean, you said you've written about this and kind of thought about this for a while. So if
Yeah.
if you've identified yourself as one or the other, is there something that uniquely you would advise someone to be looking for? Like, what is the landing spot look like for these two types?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like if I'm sitting in my cube
yeah.
and I'm like, man,
Oh,
I just
what am I?
what next?
Right.
Yeah.
What am I?
I think I'm
yeah.
serial versus
Yeah.
operator, so if I'm that, then what do I need to be, what would be some possibilities, think of futuristic for me a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you are an idea factory, you are more likely to be the guy that starts the company than scales it for a whole bunch of years. Doesn't mean you can't be, but like if you're sitting down there and all you can do is see like, oh, there's an unmet need in society and there's an unmet need and I want to go do that, and why can't that be different? Like you're more likely to be the serial type. And I think if we label me as the operator type, I think you just think about it sort of like, oh, was there a moment where I realized that's what I wanted to do? I think for me, and I probably had a bunch of those, but for me, one was, I was sitting in my cube, as you said, at the job that I had before I started Return Path at Moviefone, and I was just sitting there thinking, like, man, I think there's a better way to do some of this stuff. Like, I'd rather be running the company than running the team. And there's no knock on the guys that ran Moviefone. They were brilliant, good friends of mine, built a great business. But it was more of a spark for me of like, I want to run something and build something than I knew the thing that I wanted to go do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting just thinking about that, thinking about, how people are wired and where they would thrive best, as a landing spot or as a, step on the journey. But I'm curious.
And by the way, we are living in the golden age of entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And
you are absolutely right.
It has never been easier or cheaper to start a business. There have never been more resources available to entrepreneurs. The number of studios and accelerators, I mean, it's just off the charts.
Yep.
So I have a good friend of mine named Josh Baer, who runs an organization called Capital Factory, which is sort of the hub of all startup activity in Texas. Josh used to say, maybe still does, my job is to get other people to quit their jobs.
that is
there
true.
are a lot of people out there that feel like that. Like the more resources out there for people to start and be successful at starting businesses, the easier it is to take that leap.
Before I kind of dive into our coaching corner, our mentor moment here and really pick your brain, but in your experience, do you think that VCs, angel investors are they more comfortable with operators? Are they more comfortable with serial entrepreneurs?
I don't think there's an answer to that question. I think, I mean, if there's a correlation across the whole data set, it has to do with stage. Right.
That's
So
a good
the
point.
people that are doing pre-seed funding are probably more comfortable with the idea a minute, and private equity guys that are doing growth stage deals
Absolutely
want nothing to do with those people. So
no doubt about it.
But if you're a garden variety, like you invest in Series A for companies, you're used to both.
Yep. I love that distinction, and that was kind of in my mind as I asked that question. But so let's just shift a little bit here. So, you've had a long track record actually as a founder, long track record as leading an organization. So, give me one or two just really great nuggets as we kind of wrap up today that you think would be very germane to somebody. It doesn't matter what they're starting. Just one or two basic foundational principles that you wish you would have known much earlier in the journey that would help them out.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple. I've written a few books. The first book I wrote was called Startup CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the book that I say I wish someone had handed me when I started my company. Like it's a manual for the first time CEO. And there's a whole section in it on self-management. And that's the area that I just didn't know anything about and didn't think about when I started my first company that I wish I had, because whether it's, hey, you need to surround yourself with support systems, like you need a coach and a mentor and a great executive assistant, and like you have to have support systems. You have to take care of yourself. You have to be generally well rested, well fed, exercise. You have to have time for friends and family and hobbies, like the Stephen Covey sharpen the saw stuff is real. And you don't have to do everything every day, but like like taking care of yourself and making sure you are giving yourself the tools you need to succeed is just as important, or more important, than making sure your team has the tools that they need to succeed. So that's one thing that I think that I wish I had known at the beginning. And if I can parallel along with the three books, the second book, which is Startup CXO, I think the thing I wish I had confidence about from the beginning was that you can manage anyone. You don't just have to be able to do their job better than them or know what their job is. So, when you come up through an organization as like a functional manager or a department head, like I ran marketing and product management at Moviefone, like I had kind of done all of the marketing and product management tasks, or at least most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So like I knew how to direct people and manage people and prioritize, and then you become a CEO and you're like, well, shoot, I've never written code, or I've never, entered something in a GL before, or I've never carried a bag and sold something. Like, how can I possibly judge those people, prioritize for those people, vet them? And the answer is you can. You just develop those instincts over time. You have to have the confidence to do that. And then I would say the third thing, and I'll go to my third book, which is called Startup Boards. The thing that I really wish I had known at the beginning was your board is not a tax. Your board is not a necessary evil. It only is if you make it.
Yep.
Your board should be, if you put the energy and time into it, one of your top 3 strategic assets. But it takes that mindset, and it takes some elbow grease.
And the right people in the seats on the bus.
But that's also about how you build the board.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I so appreciate you taking time today and just sharing your story and actually just sharing the insights. And one thing you didn't mention, that you also have a blog. So give me the blog address on that.
Startup CEO, the same as my book, startupceo.com.
Startupceo.com. And it's a very interesting blog. I was looking at it earlier today, and I encourage our listeners to take a peek at that. But
thanks.
Matt, just wrap us up today. Is there anything that just short, quick thought that you think would be helpful, or the way I haven't asked you about, and then just tell people where the best place to find you online?
Well, that one's, I'm about the easiest person in the world to find online. Matt at bolster.com. If someone wants to email me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt Blumberg on Twitter. I sort of go in and out of using Twitter a lot. But, sort of final thought or kind of mentor moment is, I would say it's just never stop learning, never stop being open to new ideas. And, the deeper into my career I get, the more I realize how little I actually know.
Yeah, that is a great reminder, and it's kind of like we become teenagers over and over again. We think we know, and when we find out how little we do,
Yeah.
once we hit parenthood. But Matt, thank you again for just taking the time today. It's been a great chat, and really enjoyed just hearing your story and just connecting with you over this digital platform. But and just once again, thank you for just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. And have a great weekend.
Thanks, Kevin. Great conversation. Really interesting format and questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
We hope you heard some great takeaways. Make sure you follow up with our guests today and show them the support they deserve. As always, thank you for listening and playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.